Good evening. This is Jim Jonas and Stephanie Phelps with another episode of Veterans of Politics. We have a special guest today, Jonathan Cooper, who's running for North Las Vegas Justice of the Peace, Department 2, which before we get in our rants, I just wanted to say, if you don't know what the Justice of the Peace does, Jonathan will explain it a little further. But I always call it the People's Court, and a lot of people don't pay attention to down ballot candidates, and they should. So with that being said, so Stephanie, I know you got a rant. You always got something.
We were ranting about the DNC and, them saying they're going to fix stuff when they've been in there for 3.5 years and haven't done anything. But the other thing I would say is that once a lot of politicians and elected leaders, they get elected, they forget about the people who got them there. And, they're not in touch with their constituents and even candidates, that move through primaries sometimes. They forget about who got them through those primaries, and then you're persona non grata. And I know there's a lot of people in this state that are working really hard for candidates and trying to organize stuff and promote them and get people to rally around them. And you try and contact the campaign and it's crickets. So I would say to candidates, elected leaders, please be in touch with your people, because if it wasn't for the people, you wouldn't be there.
And I really like what you said. I want to actually just kind of expand on that a little bit from my perspective. I've been saying this on the show for years, that and I said it on the last podcast too, but I'm just going to keep repeating it and somebody will finally listen. You can't blame these politicians for being the way they are if they're not holding them accountable. So people need to start holding these politicians accountable. It's just absolutely in this. I know it's going to seem partisan, but it's not really a partisan issue on this one. When you have the vice president running for president of the United States saying that Bidenomics worked and, the economy is doing great. Well, in what rational world are you really buying this? I mean, you're being fed a lie. And you know what? Trump might not have been any better. I don't know. But I do know when I'm being lied to. And people need to start understanding that. And not just, I guess, I'm just going to leave it at this. When I was growing up, one of the people that I most admired, and I was really young, but I read a lot of the stuff he said, and it was Martin Luther King Jr., and he talked about the content of character, not the color of someone's skin. And now all of a sudden that seems to be all that matters. Now all we talk about is race, religion, and politics in this country. We don't need to keep talking about that all the time. 90% of the time, we're all going to agree because we're all people. And I think that needs to happen. And I could go on all day. But I don't want to get too far in the weeds on this one. I just want to really thank Jonathan Cooper for coming in. Sir, can you give a brief bio about yourself, like where you came from,
absolutely.
Grew up, and all that?
Yeah. Well, first off, absolutely thank you for having me. That was my first time ever hearing People's Court, so that's something I'm probably going to steal now. So thank you for that. So absolutely. Again, nice to see you again.
Good to see you too.
My name is Jonathan Cooper. Like was said, I'm a Las Vegas guy. El Dorado High School, graduated too long ago now to talk about, but over 20 years ago. And after that, I joined the United States Army. I was initially a military police officer. I was stationed at Fort Leonard Wood. I was I was lucky enough to be accepted into an early commissioning program at Wentworth Military Academy. And then I was commissioned as an Army aviation officer. And that was back in 2005. After getting out of the Army, I went to law school. I ultimately finished law school at the University of Missouri, came back home, and I had the privilege of working at the district attorney's office where I worked for 7 years. After that, I became a defense attorney, and now I am a hearing master. A lot of people don't know what hearing masters do. So in a very short synopsis, a hearing master is very similar to a judge, only they're appointed, not elected, and we have a little more limited duties. So the only duty I have right now is I do domestic violence protection orders, which is near and dear to my heart because I do want to make sure that victims of domestic violence are kept safe. And I've been doing that for the last 2 years. Decided to run for office, North Las Vegas Justice Court. I don't know if we're going to get into it, but why I decided to run, that might be for a little bit later. But I saw a need in the community, and I knew that I had the experience both as a prosecutor and as a defense attorney, where I could be that fair and impartial person, not leaning to one side or another, and just go in there and give it my all for our community. Other than that, I'm proud to be a candidate that's endorsed by Veterans in Politics, endorsed by several other veteran organizations as well. So yeah, that's generally me.
Yeah. So okay, you kind of brought up the hearing master thing. Not elected, appointed. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I know what the state law is, but in your opinion, do you think judges should be elected or appointed? Because one of the things that we've brought up here several times in Veterans of Politics is maybe the Missouri plan might work a little better. So someone gets appointed, and then they get retained.
Retained through election. Yeah. I mean, I do like that plan, right? Obviously, Nevada has its own specific set of laws as it relates to that, and it's interesting, appointed versus elected. Because I think you have pluses for both sides and you have negatives for both sides, right? So elected, obviously the negative is that, and you already hit on this, most people don't know who their judges are. They don't, right? And I guess that's a good thing and a bad thing. Good thing because you're not in front of a judge. That's great. Nobody wants to be in front of a judge. But it's also a bad thing because judges are so impactful on our day-to-day lives. We don't necessarily understand how impactful they are until they affect our day-to-day life. So obviously judges deal with all your family court cases. Judges deal with your criminal cases, civil cases. If you're hurt in a car accident, you're going to go in front of a judge at some point. So judges are extremely important. They deal with the evictions, and I could just keep going. But because people don't necessarily know a lot about their judges, elections sometimes don't work because you may vote for someone I don't know, based on, well, their name was first on the ballot, or based on, I like their name better. I don't know. Unfortunately, when there's not a lot of information behind a candidate, it does sometimes lead to results that we might not necessarily think are just or that we want. But then on the other side, appointments, you get into the situation where, the candidates are going to be a lot more well-known. But you can also get into a situation where it may be like as they say, I think it's called the old boy system. I don't know if it's called that anymore. But you get into a situation where it's just a friend of a friend of a friend that ultimately got appointed, and you don't necessarily know if they're actually going to be the best candidate for the job. But appointments, like I said, you do get a lot of qualified candidates that get appointed. So you just kind of have to balance both sides. The Missouri process is great, right? You get the appointment up front, so you know the candidate is knowledgeable. You know that they're meeting all their requirements, but then at the same time, the public does have the right to also ultimately retain them if they deem it appropriate. I don't unfortunately know the numbers, if you will, regarding how many people aren't appointed. I mean, how many people aren't retained. It may just be 100% are always retained, and then it doesn't really get you anything different. Right. But I don't know those numbers. So that would have to be a question for a different day.
Okay, so let me ask you this next question then. Okay, well, right now, Nevada state law is judges get elected. Okay, once elected, and we hope you get elected, you're our endorsed candidate, so God willing, you get elected, right?
That's the plan.
So when elected, voter turnout is just horrific when it comes to judicial candidates. I was looking it up and I broke it down. Non-presidential years, it's like below 2% of people that actually, eligible voters that actually even vote for judges. Presidential elections, it gets a little better. It's almost 4%. Once elected, though, what will you do, because it is state law, to try to keep people engaged in the process and teach them how important it is to elect judges?
Absolutely. So I mean, I guess the easy answer for me is just to make sure I'm doing my job appropriately. Make sure that people understand that if you have a good judge on the bench, that's somebody that you want to be on the bench. You want that person making decisions that are going to impact the day-to-day life of our citizens. Because I guarantee if you have a bad judge on the bench, you're definitely going to remember it. The problem is that, unfortunately, I think that's just kind of how we're wired as humans, right? That if we have a bad experience, my dad once told me that the best way to teach yourself, or the best learning tool, is failure. So I think that's just how we're wired. So when we see something bad happen, I think we always remember it. But if you see something good happening, you kind of forget it sometimes. So I just want to be the best judge I can be, and maybe kind of break through that wall and just continue to keep people engaged. Stay in the community, stay active in the community. Don't just be active well, we have to run every 6 years. So don't be active every 6 years, right? Actually be active on a day-to-day basis. One thing that I did love to do, even before I decided to run years ago, I got into a program called the Truancy Diversion Program. And that was a program put on by the district court where we went to several different schools throughout Clark County and tried to encourage students to stay in school. Because as we know, education is the number one way to get out of poverty, number one way to ensure that we're not going to end up in jail, things like that. So I was very proud because I ultimately got the opportunity to go to my alma mater, El Dorado. And last year I was at El Dorado, and I did that for the whole year. Just talking to kids on every Friday at 7 a.m. I was there talking to kids about staying in school. And just continuing to do stuff like that to keep people engaged and let them know that I'm not just here every 6 years, I'm here for them every day.
That's awesome. I first want to say thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you.
And my son spent some time at Fort Leonard Wood. He's
Fort Lost in the Woods, yeah.
Oh my gosh. He's a commissioned officer as well.
Absolutely.
He's spending time in Georgia now.
Okay.
But I was wondering, you, as a justice of the peace, can you tell people quickly what kind of cases you're going to be handling? And then I want to ask you another question.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Again, I'm still in people's court. Justice of the peace is just that, right? All criminal cases that are felonies that start in the city of North Las Vegas will come to me first. So just a quick breakdown. I'm not going to bore you with all the legalese, but North Las Vegas has two different courts. They have justice court and they have municipal court. Municipal court deals with your general misdemeanors, and they deal with like the traffic tickets and a couple other things. Justice court would be dealing with any felony that starts in the city limits of North Las Vegas. I also would deal with all the evictions that happen in North Las Vegas. I would deal with protection orders that are non-domestic in nature. So my job now is to deal with domestic protection orders, which means under the statute, NRS 33.018, if anyone wants to look it up, there is a domestic relationship, meaning boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, family members, mother, daughter, dad, son, domestic relationships. Protection orders that do not relate to a domestic relationship, they go to justice court. And so any ones that come out of North Las Vegas will come to me, as well as your small claims matters. So matters that are in controversy for less than $10,000. Those will all start in your justice court. So it's a very wide gambit of types of cases that you need to be able to be familiar with and handle. So it is very important because you deal with the people on a day-to-day basis.
When you're dealing with protective orders, you hear people, they can go in and say, so-and-so is doing this to me and all of this. And basically they could lie, they could make certain claims. And some of these people actually get these protective orders granted. So what is that threshold that you look for? What has to be presented to you where you're going to say, yeah, this person is definitely in danger. We're going to issue this TPO, and talk about that first.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great question, and that's something that we all struggle with. So the statute says that it has to be satisfaction of the court. No one knows what that standard means, but the judicial rules did define it as probable cause. So probable cause is the same standard that the police have, and it's the same standard that the district attorney's office needs when they're ultimately deciding if they're going to charge a crime. Probable cause essentially means that it's more likely than not that the person that is being accused is the person that committed the offense. So it's more likely than not an offense occurred, and it's more likely than not that the person committed the offense. In terms of how you determine that, it's hard, and it really is. I'm going to be honest. I sit up nights sometimes saying I should have granted it or I shouldn't have granted it, because you're trying to do the best you can, but the way the protection order process works is the applicant is the only one that appears for that first hearing, at least in domestic violence court. In justice court, it's a little bit different because their statutes are a little bit different regarding their timelines. So in domestic violence court, we have to actually hear an application within one judicial day. And that's because domestic violence is a very serious problem, and we need to act as fast as possible to ensure people are safe. But one judicial day is not a lot of time. So essentially the process works is someone comes in, they say, I'm a victim of domestic violence. They explain to me the process as to why, or explain to me their version as to what happened. We, to the best of our ability, act as both, in layman's terms, act as a prosecutor and act as the defense attorney, because we're the only one there asking questions. So I'll ask questions about, well, has this person ever committed acts of violence against you before? Well, tell me about that. Just kind of getting the backstory and getting the history to see if there is that still ongoing threat. But then I'll also ask questions defense oriented, right? Well, how do you know, like, for example, if it's he keeps calling me, he calls me 100 times a day. Well, how do you know it was him? Did you answer the phone every single time? Was it no caller ID? Was he calling from his number? There's a lot of different questions we ask to try to get to the bottom of that, because domestic violence under the statute is broader than just physical attacks. It includes threats to commit acts of violence, long as they're credible. And it includes stalking. It includes destruction of private property. There's a lot of different categories that fall under domestic violence under the statute. So we have to ask all those different questions. And that's why I feel that this is a great position for me, because I was a prosecutor. So I know the kind of questions a prosecutor asks. I was a defense attorney. I know the kind of questions a defense attorney asks. And even as a prosecutor and a defense attorney, I dealt with domestic violence cases. So having that big threshold of knowledge, I guess, makes me ideally suited for this position. And I think that's also going to make me ideally suited for being a justice of the peace. So that's a very long answer to say it's an extremely hard process. And I'll be the first to say that I would bet that cases have been granted, protection orders have been granted for cases that they should not have been. But protection orders probably have also been granted for cases they should have been too, or not granted for cases they should have been, because it is hard. And we do the best we can, but
when you find out that somebody has lied about, the actions of others and they were seeking a TPO, what should happen to those people? People that lie about it, and just crime in general,
Absolutely.
They lie, this person did this to me or that, and they end up lying, or they find out they were lying. What should happen?
So absolutely, that's a crime. So that's perjury, 100%. That is a crime. And that should be prosecuted. I fully believe that, because especially in the protection order aspect, the court's already at a disadvantage because I'm only hearing your side of it. You are sworn, I swear everyone in to tell the truth. And if you're not taking that oath to heart, and you're just going to lie to me because you want to get back to someone, that's absolutely inappropriate, and you need to be held accountable. I say that, but I also say that it's unfortunately extremely hard to prove somebody lies, because there are always two sides to a story. So we traditionally don't see a lot of the blatant lies that can be disproven, where, for example, traditionally we don't see, well, he came to my house last night and he attacked me, but really that guy can prove that he, or that female or that guy can prove that they were in a different state when it happens. That's not really what we see. What we see is usually exaggerations. Like, it's like, she was threatening me. She was yelling at me. She was threatening me. She got super close to my face and she pushes me. And then it turns out when I bring the other person in, it wasn't really a push. I was trying to walk past you and my shoulder bumped your shoulder. Well, that's a little bit different, right? The intent is different. In my court, when I'm talking about physical domestic violence, I'm talking about an action that was intended to cause harm. Not an action that was an accident or accidental in nature. Like you want to see my phone. I don't want you to see it. You and I are struggling over the phone. I accidentally scratch you. That absolutely is inappropriate and it should not happen, but I don't think that rises to the level of domestic violence. If you want to see my phone and I don't want you to see my phone and I punch you, absolutely, that's domestic violence. That's a completely different threshold. But what we see is just the exaggeration. So to prove someone is lying is a little harder because their first defense is going to be, well, that's how I remembered it. And I can't ever disprove that's how you remembered it because that's your memory. And then he's going to say that's how he remembered it. And then we kind of get in that same situation. So unfortunately, perjury cases are not prosecuted a lot because they are extremely hard to prove. But absolutely, if they can prove it, I absolutely believe they should be prosecuted because now I have to keep going because you're taking away someone's liberty rights, right? Like you're taking away their ability to live in a house. A protection order keeps people away from living in their house. A protection order can prevent people from seeing their kids. A protection order can keep people fired from their job. If you're an armed security guard and you have a protection order, you can't work. So the types of cases that we deal with may seem like small in nature because they're only really misdemeanors generally, but the impact is so large. And if you're gonna not tell the truth and get a protection order just because you're upset, absolutely not appropriate.
So, Jonathan, and this is kind of in the same realm of questioning that Stephanie had. So, one of the things that I almost always ask judicial candidates is NRS statutes. Now, obviously, it's an NRS statute. You got to follow it.
Absolutely.
Because that's just the way it is. Like, you shouldn't legislate from the bench, and I get all that. But at the same time, I'm always like, do you get, because you're already a hearing master, do you think that NRS statutes, I mean, even though the legislature is the body that writes the laws, and I get that, I respect that, but do you think some of the NRS statutes are just too stringent and the judges don't get enough leeway? Because ultimately, especially as a JP, you're going to get a lot more information than the legislature has, right? Mm-hmm. But they state that, like, okay, if you find them guilty of this, this is the minimum sentence, maximum sentence. This is the minimum amount of money they have to pay, the maximum amount of money they have to pay. Do you think that's a little too stringent? Or how would you go about that, like with your legislative liaison?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very good question. I guess to answer that question, I have to give a little backstory, right? So, like I said, I was a prosecutor, right? Yeah. And as a prosecutor, I thought that the crimes, the legislation was not hard enough. As a defense attorney, I thought it was too hard. Right. So we go through those ups and balances in our lives. But now, obviously, seeing both sides of it, you kind of get that more of a middle ground. Yeah. So I think one thing I've seen really good judges do that were JPs is be able to find that middle ground while also still following the statutes. Because, like you said, I would never legislate from the bench. Yeah. I absolutely am going to follow the statutes the best of my ability as I interpret them. But for example, for a charge that says, well, the minimum fine is $1,000. I'm sorry, the minimum fine is $1. The maximum fine is $1,000. Right. If I feel like $1,000 is too much, or if I feel like $1 is not enough, like how do you come into that middle ground? Right. And you can do other things that can either enhance the punishment or can take away from the punishment. So, for example, what I've seen people do is I'm going to fine you $500. But you served 4 days in jail. So I'm going to give you $100 credit per day in jail. So really your fine's only $100, but the actual fine was $500. So I've seen that happen. And I've seen the contrary where I can only fine you up to $1,000, but what you did is so offensive, I'm also going to make you do 100 hours of community service. So they do 100 hours community service and $1,000 fine. So you can kind of enhance the punishment in that way, just depending on what exactly you're looking at. So I do think as a JP, you absolutely can follow the law and ensure that you're not legislating from the bench. But at the same time, you can make sure that the punishment that you're giving out is what is actually deserved for what happened. And I say all that to also say that, as we all know, in the criminal justice system, 99% of cases are ultimately plea bargain. And
I'm glad you said that, because I was going to touch on that next.
And
I'm glad you said that.
And plea bargaining, I get people have pluses and minuses for plea bargaining, just like we talked about for the appointment versus the election. Right. Everything has a pro and a con. But if there was not plea bargaining, the criminal justice system would shut down tomorrow. Right. And that's just facts, right? We have people, a JP maybe has 40 different new arraignments every single day. To set 40 jury trials every single day, you're talking about, 200 jury trials a week just for one JP? Absolutely no way that can be handled. I mean, one district court judge can only handle one jury trial a week. For just one JP in a week, you would almost take up the entire year of a district court. It just practically doesn't work. So you have to do plea bargains. So with that said, I think one of the important things that a JP does is give deference to the prosecutor and the defense attorney, because they're going to know more about that case than me. I'm going to see the people. I'm going to hear everything. I'm going to read the police report. But they would have been working on that case for months. They've been going back and forth regarding different negotiations. They've talked to the victim. They've talked to the defendant's family to see if he has any resources or she has any resources. They've done all that back work. So as a JP, I think it is extremely important to ensure that we give them deference. And if they are making a plea bargain, unless it's something that's completely outside the realm of reasonableness, I need to give them deference and to the best of my ability follow those type of plea bargains. But like I said, that doesn't just make me a rubber stamp. You still have to look at it in the totality of everything else going on and ultimately decide whether or not it's fair and just. But plea bargains are absolutely reality, and we need them in order to keep the process moving.
Yeah.
Sometimes they negotiate too much. Like those kids that beat that, his name is Jonathan, what's his last name? The high school kid, beat him to death. And just last year, the gang of teens, there's 14 or 15 of them, beat the kid to death. And then the DA's office reduces them to being charged as juveniles instead of being charged as adults. I think that came out a few weeks ago. When you've got a case like that is so egregious and horrific, and then they go and do something like that, I think that there should be some hard, fast rules where, with some of these cases, you cannot do that. And they want to just negotiate their way out of a whole lot of these cases that shouldn't be. They should be tried and they should be held accountable. And these kids are going to go off and, graduate high school and continue on and forget about the poor kid that they killed.
Yeah. So I have heard of that case, right? But the only information I have is from the news. So unfortunately, I don't have any more information regarding exactly why the prosecutors felt that was the negotiation they wanted to reach. I don't. The one thing I will say is that being in the prosecutor's office, I dealt with. Unfortunately, it was a while ago now, where I'm getting old. So a lot of the people I was working with probably aren't there anymore. But I know they do absolutely do the best job they can. Now, do people get it right? Do people get it wrong? Yeah. In that particular case, I can't really say what exactly happened. But speaking generally, I will absolutely tell you that if I feel like a negotiation is inappropriate, whether it be because they're asking for the moon and the stars for something that doesn't deserve it, or whether it be they're not asking for enough, I think that would be my role to step in. Absolutely. As a JP, I would never deal with that type of situation. That was already in district court. Yeah, right. But yeah, I think it is my role to ensure that the results, one way or another, are we always say the spectrum of reasonableness because right, one prosecutor can think one thing is reasonable, and another just as good a prosecutor can think something else is reasonable. Long as you're in that spectrum, right? So the example would be, if you get caught speeding going 10 miles over, maybe it's a $100 fine, maybe it's a $600 fine. Those are still generally in the same realm of reasonableness. But doing 10 miles over the speed limit, you don't go to prison for 10 years. That's something completely outside the realm of reasonableness.
Yeah.
So that's what I talk about with the realm. I think we just have to make sure that people are within that realm of reasonableness and give the district attorneys and the public defenders or the defense attorneys a little bit of, I'm going to use the term grace for lack of a better word, when I'm trying to determine what that reasonableness is. But again, I don't know enough on that case to be able to say whether or not that was reasonable or not.
When do you decide to recuse yourself on a certain case? What's that threshold?
And I have done it. I have done it as a hearing master. If I know the parties, and even the rules basically say that if you feel like it can impede your ability to be fair and impartial, generally. But I think it's always better to err on the side of caution. And if I know the party, whether it be in a personal interaction, I've had situations where a former client may have come through my court. Absolutely recuse myself. I've had situations where this guy I kind of knew in high school. We weren't really friends, but I know him and I kind of recognize him. Absolutely recuse myself, because you don't ever want to get that idea that you're treating anyone differently, because if that happens, the entire system shuts down. If you can't trust the court system, everything shuts down. So I have always been extremely cautious with making sure that I would not touch a case that that any possibility of a connection could be.
What if there's a judge that is married to or lives with the assistant DA, and they're in charge of all these attorneys in the district attorney's office, but they are looking at criminal cases? How does that work?
That's a good question. So I don't know.
If you were married to the district attorney, and you're a judge, and you're taking criminal cases, and these are brought in, or the assistant DA, so how does that work?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think I would have to say that if the person I was married to was coming into my courtroom, that's absolutely not appropriate. If somebody that worked for the person I was married to came in, I honestly, I would just have to defer to judicial ethics to see whether or not they think it's appropriate. I don't know. I don't know. Because I will be the first to say that I am I'm extremely cautious. And my wife will say that too. It's even in the way I drive. I said going 10 miles over the speed limit. If you catch me going over a mile over the speed limit, my wife will be shocked. But that's just how I live my life. Very cautious, but not saying that's right or wrong, just saying that's my own personal opinion.
It is right. You're following the law. You're going the speed limit.
I'm glad you brought that up, Stephanie, and thank you for bringing this up, because so when we talk about recusing yourself as a judge, and I've never asked this question before, but now I get the opportunity. So is there any kind of threshold as far as how many times you can recuse yourself in a year? Because if you just continually keep recusing yourself, well, I think I've known this person at some point. Does the chief judge have to step in and go, hey, you're just taxpayers aren't getting their money's worth here. You're not sitting on the bench as much as you should. Yeah,
that's a good question. So the one thing I would say is that I guess that could be a concern. Absolutely. I personally don't know of any times that has been a concern.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. If you did find a judge that just wanted to not work as hard, that absolutely could be a concern. And the chief judge would be the correct person to kind of intercede, either in situations where you do recuse yourself or you don't recuse yourself, in those type of situations. But
don't you have the option though, if you tell both sides, hey, I know this person from way back when, and if both parties don't have a problem with it, then you can continue on. Isn't that an option too?
Yeah, so absolutely. So yeah, I think the processes which I use is that if I'm going to recuse myself or I'm not going to recuse myself, I make it known to the parties and I say, hey, this is the situation. I knew this guy when I was 18. This isn't really going to affect my opinion. And then you ask the opposing party, are you okay with it? You ask the other party, because he may hate me. So maybe he doesn't want me on the bench, right? I don't know. So you ask both sides if they're okay with it. If they're okay with it and you feel like you're okay with it, then it's fine. I think it's kind of a weird situation, though, because I don't tell them what my position is first, right? I say, hey, this is the situation. Do you feel like I should recuse myself? Do you feel like I should recuse myself? And I don't know, right? What if they say, yes, you should? But in my mind, I'm like, I'm not going to. So then it kind of puts people in a bad situation. So that as I'm talking through that, maybe I should just tell them what my position is first to just alleviate the possibility of them feeling like I'm trying to influence them, because that's something you don't want to do. Mm-hmm. So now as I'm saying that out loud, maybe I should think of a better way to do it. But yeah, they absolutely, if they want me to stay on the case, I absolutely can.
Okay. So Jonathan, then my next question would be, so, and this is more just informative because I'm learning a lot. And Steve gets mad at me. He says I don't pay enough attention to judicial races, but I try. I think he's just making fun of me because he's more knowledgeable than I am on judicial races. Everything else I got to beat. Anyway, so
is he watching? Does he know you said that?
Oh yeah. No, he's watching. He's right around the corner. Trust me.
He's probably texting you right now.
Oh yeah. No, I'll get on that one. But anyway, I love messing with Steve. We've been friends forever. But so we were talking about recusing yourself, and then you were talking about communication back and forth between the parties. Mm-hmm. So Justice of the Peace, North Las Vegas, Department 2, mm-hmm. like what would a typical schedule look like for you?
Absolutely.
Because you're sitting on the bench, but then you're trying to communicate with all these other people. Like, how do you sort out a calendar to which you can do all this stuff?
Yeah. So, Justice of the Peace, traditionally, and I haven't been there yet, so this is kind of what I've gleaned from the position, right. Is that you do have all your different calendars and they're set on different days. So criminal is going to be the vast majority of your cases, and that's 4 days a week. So in the mornings, 4 days a week. The afternoons are going to be switching back and forth from your different matters, where it's your small claims is going to be on one afternoon, your protection orders are going to be in a different afternoon, and then evictions, depending on how many you have, could take up 2 afternoons. And then your other day is like an administrative day, which is where you do all the additional stuff. You're doing all the prep work to get you ready for all the other remaining cases. You also are doing the search warrant duty. So because North Las Vegas is a smaller jurisdiction, we only have 3 judges there. You're on search warrant duty a lot more frequently. For example, in Las Vegas, obviously, I think there's, I'm going to butcher it now because there's so many, I think probably 20 plus JPs. The rotation is a lot longer. But for JPs in North Las Vegas, it's only 3, so there's a shorter rotation. So then you have your search warrant. Then you also have your signing days, where you're actually signing the arrest warrants and things like that. And that's all kind of stuff you would do in your administrative day.
Of course, caught up on the evictions, because way back during COVID, you couldn't evict people and all this. So, and there was such a backlog there. Has that gone through the system now?
So the backlog, so I actually went to go, because very, very early on in my legal career, I did do a little bit of eviction stuff before I became a district attorney. But since then, I haven't really done much. And I wanted to make sure that when I get elected, I am fully knowledgeable and able to enter the office first day and just start running. I have actually watched evictions in North Las Vegas to kind of see the process and make sure that I'm up to speed on everything. And they are through that backlog. But even through the backlog, there are still, like, for example, the one eviction calendar I watched, that one specific afternoon for that one specific judge, I think there was 45 or 50 eviction cases for that one time period. And this is not like, oh, these evictions have been languishing for 6 or 7 months. These are fresh, just happened. So it's definitely a big issue, especially in North Las Vegas. So yeah,
Yeah, just rents are so high and cost of living, and that's a whole nother subject.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, all the
We won't
different
get on
factors you gotta put in together. Yeah.
So, another question I have for you, and I've asked this everybody, and everybody kind of had different ideas. So, when you say you're running for Justice of the Peace in North Las Vegas Department 2, how do these departments work?
Yeah.
I mean, what does Department 2 mean? Like, what kind of cases do you hear? Which cases don't you hear? How is that divided out?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, very good question. Because different jurisdictions do it differently. So Las Vegas actually has different departments that are assigned specific cases. So the vast majority of the cases in North Las Vegas, vast majority of the cases in Las Vegas, they just get randomly assigned. But because they have so many different JPs, they do have their specialty assignments too. So for example, DUIs all go to one JP. Domestic violence, I think, goes to 2 different JPs now. There's something called the Strip Corridor, where crimes that happen in and around the Strip, they go to 2 different JPs. So they are able to kind of isolate out different areas, and those JPs are able to focus on that, especially DUIs, because DUIs are so technical. It is good to have one judge that deals with that, because they get very familiar in all the technical ins and outs of DUI law. North Las Vegas, again, we're a smaller jurisdiction. So Department 2 doesn't really have a specific designation. I would hear all the same cases as Department 1 and Department 3. It's just a random assignment going between the judges. So, I mean, ultimately, North Las Vegas is one of the fastest growing cities in the country right now. Especially, I think we're number 3 in Nevada in terms of size. I would like one day, once we get more judges, to maybe like kind of get more specialized assignments, even like whether it be one JP does evictions because they can get really familiar with how that process works. One JP does DUIs, and then maybe also the DV stuff. I think that would be great, but we're not there yet, unfortunately.
I agree with you on that. I've actually pushed. I think there should be more. It should be more specialized courts. And by specialized court, obviously, I'm a fan of the Veterans Court, obviously.
Absolutely.
But, and the reason why I always push for these specialty courts is exactly what you just said. And I think one of the things that really frustrates me about Las Vegas, and I do understand that, you know, it's such a large city, and I get that. But for the life of me, I've never been able to understand the split docket. People argue back and forth all the time. Oh, they only have so much civil experience. Well, they only have so much criminal experience. I'm like, why can't you just break it down to where these departments only handle criminal, these departments only handle civil?
Yeah. That's actually, that's interesting. So I would agree with you that the vast majority of district courts, they have both the civil and the criminal. Same thing with the JPs. Yeah. The district court has took that a little bit, where they do have some judges that only do criminal, but it's because they have a criminal calendar, and then they do, there's a homicide calendar. So they have like only certain judges that do the homicides. And then they do have some judges that only do civil. But I would agree with you that me coming from a criminal background, I think I would best be able to serve my community doing criminal work, because I've seen both sides of the criminal justice system. Now, I think I'm a great attorney, and I think I'm very smart, and I absolutely am going to learn everything I can about civil. But I mean, and this may be a downfall for myself, I'll be honest, I'm never going to know as much about civil as somebody that's been practicing civil for 20 years. I just can't be. Thankfully, JPs, the vast majority of the stuff I'm going to be doing is criminal, and then the protection orders I deal with on a day-to-day basis now. So what I need to continue to learn is a lot smaller. But yeah, I do like that process. I just, I unfortunately am still very low on the totem pole. So I don't know how all the inner connections work as you get higher up related to.
Well, in November, you'll be a little higher on the totem pole, so you'll be all right.
Just, like one rung. Yeah. Just slowly but surely keep climbing. Yeah. But yeah, that's very, very good question.
You got any more questions, Seth?
I don't. I'm good. I was just going to say, is there anything that we haven't talked about or asked you that you want to talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing you hit on is Veterans Court. So Everyone, I'm sure everyone watching here probably is familiar with the Veterans Court program and how they work. Some things people might not be familiar with is kind of the interconnection where every jurisdiction has its own Veterans Court, and a lot of people don't know that. So Las Vegas has its own Veterans Court. I'm talking about Las Vegas City, Las Vegas Justice Court, Henderson Justice Court, North Las Vegas City, North Las Vegas Justice Court, and then District Court has a Veterans Court too. So they have all these different veterans courts. And one thing I have noticed is that as you continue to learn more about the process, you see what works and what does not work in different veterans courts. And a friend of mine who's a judge in Henderson, she does the veterans court out there, and she was kind of telling me like some of the stuff that they've been implementing recently. I'm all for it. I think it's great, and that's something that I do want to bring to North Las Vegas. I think being a veteran myself, I think I would be a great, if I'm not in charge of the Veterans Court, which I hope I can be, but if not, I think I would be a great resource to at least be able to assist with that program, because veteran issues are near and dear to my heart. Unfortunately, I've had a lot of friends that I've met through the service that got PTSD, that got they never were the same again. And I've seen what that happens to people and how that can interfere with their lives. And I definitely want to do everything I can to make sure that the country does everything they can for them, because I saw what these people did, and they definitely deserve the world. But yeah, I don't want to get choked up, so I'll stop.
Well, Jonathan, first off, I want to thank you so much for coming on. I want to make sure that I let all the listeners and viewers know that Jonathan Cooper is running for North Las Vegas Justice of the Peace Department 2. We've endorsed him. That's Veterans of Politics International, Nevada Veterans Association, and
Armed Forces
Chamber. I can't get all that out. Armed Forces Chamber PAC. Sorry, Andre, don't yell. I'm sure I'll get a text message on that one. But Jonathan, I really want to thank you so much for coming on. And one of the things that really impressed me the most about you, and I'm so proud that our organizations endorsed you, is because you have prosecutor experience, defense attorney experience. And that's something that I personally look for in a judge.
Absolutely.
Because then you truly understand what you have to do in the letter of the law from both sides. And I think that is fundamental with the 14th Amendment in this country. And I think that's something that's truly lacking in a lot of our judicial candidates. But right now, Jonathan, what I'd like you to do is just look in the camera. Mark will zoom in on you and just give any last minute comments you want to make. Make sure you get out your point of contact information.
Absolutely.
Too.
Yeah, and actually, thank you for reminding me of that, because one thing that Stephanie said that did hit home was that sometimes candidates are not connecting with the community. So I want everyone to know I'm a member of this community. I deeply love this community. And if you have any questions, if you want to talk to me, I'm going to give you my personal cell phone number. It's 702-545-8110. That is it. If you don't believe me, you can call it right now. It might ring while we're here. But that absolutely is me. If you want to talk to me about whatever is going on and you just want me to know something going on that you have a concern about, absolutely tell me about it. Number one. Number two, my daughter, she's 11. She came up with the campaign slogan, so I'd be remiss if I didn't say it. It's Be Super, Vote Cooper. Remember that on November 5th. Be Super, Vote Cooper. You can also look me up on my website. It's Cooper for Judge. Cooper, the number 4 judge.com. That's the same for my Instagram and my Facebook as well. And again, if you don't want to call me, I haven't got any calls yet, but if you don't want to call me, you can definitely reach out to me on my socials, and I'll definitely make sure I get back to you. Thank you.
Well, Jonathan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming in. And ladies and gentlemen, you have to make sure that you pay attention to judicial races. A judge's decision impacts your life immediately. and stop not paying attention to judicial races.
Whoa.
With that being said, this is Jim Jonas and Stephanie Phillips of Veterans Politics. Until next time.